Hello and welcome to our virtual Big Ask Big Give. We're a minute or so before 10 o'clock, so for those joining, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes to let the others join before we get started. Okay, it looks like we have a good group joining so far, over 20 people. I'm going to go ahead and just do a brief introduction of the Big Ask Big Give program, and then I will hand it over to UC for the bulk of the presentation. So my name's April. It doesn't say that on the screen. We had a little Zoom issue this morning. My name's April Abel. I'm the director for the Kidney Foundation in Kentucky and Southern Ohio. Thank you so much for joining our program today, and a big thank you for UC Health for helping us host it. So today we're going to be speaking a little bit about what the overall campaign is. This is one part of it, this workshop, but it's a part of an overall platform. We also have an awareness campaign. We have a website you can see on the screen there. It's kidney.org/living donation that you can view for extra resources after the presentation. Also, we have NKF Cares and Peers hotlines. Everyone should have received a packet through email from Perry Hall, our Senior Development Director. And it also has this information, I think on the last page of the packet or the second to last page, where you can access either of those hotlines and also other materials from ourselves and from UC. So next up, so why are we here today? You know that living donation is the best option for patients, but you may be apprehensive to share your story, to make that big ask. So we're here today to offer some resources to help and some guidance from our professionals here at UC, and also some extra resources from the National Kidney Foundation. So of course, I want to again thank UC Health for their support in supporting this program. And a couple more slides. And then just quickly go over what we'll be going through today, the different strategies that you'll use after leaving the call. So quickly, there's just a few key strategies we'll be going through. Those are knowing the facts, what it is to be a living donor and what transplantation looks like, creating your own story, building a network of advocates to help you share that story and spread the word. And then you'll also be talking about creating a microsite to also help in that effort. And then we'll open it up to questions. So just quickly, we'll have an opportunity for questions at the end of each speaker. You can either raise your hand, there's an option at the bottom to raise your hand and we can unmute you, or there's also a chat box and you can type a question into that chat box. Either one of those is fine. We'll be doing that after each speaker, but then more time at the end, depending on how much time we have here today. So we'll get started now. I'm going to welcome Monica Watson. She's an independent living donor advocate at UC to get us started with the true or false portion.
Thank you, April. Yes, good morning, everyone. And thank you for taking some time out of your day to join us to learn a little bit more about kidney donation. So I am the living donor advocate, as April said, at UC. I'm a social worker, and today I'm just going to talk with you about some facts about kidney donation. I just have a slide here with some of the main things that people typically ask me about when they come in, or once they've decided that they'd like to try to donate a kidney, just some general information. So first things first, a lot of people always ask about time in the hospital. How long will they be in the hospital after they have donated a kidney? And although this slide here says that the average hospital stay is 2 nights, here at UC, it's typically 1 night. So it's a pretty quick turnaround. And then secondly, a lot of people often ask about medications. Do they have to take medications for life after they've become a donor? And the answer to that is no. After your hospitalization, people are sent home with some general prescriptions for pain control. And those medications are typically just a short 2-week course. And then after that, there is no lifelong medications. The next thing, a lot of people typically ask about bed rest, when will they be able to get up and move around? Typically, that's immediately. As soon as folks are feeling well enough to get up out of the bed, the nurse will be encouraging them to ambulate, of course, with assistance at first. Most people are up and walking the same day, like after surgery, once they've had time to wake up and are feeling quite well. Of course, you're not discharged home until you are, kind of getting back to your normal functioning. Diet is another question I get often. If you know someone or if you're interested in coming in to be evaluated to become a donor, you will have an opportunity to meet with our dietitian on staff, and they go over these things in detail with you. But typically, it's all about moderation after you have donated a kidney. So of course, just continuing a healthy, well-balanced diet, but there are no specific dietary restrictions after donation. Another big one in line with that is alcohol consumption. So of course, excessive alcohol use is dangerous for any of us. Again, the key is moderation. So, having a glass of wine on the weekend with friends, something like that, you can still continue to do after donation. Next, out-of-pocket expenses. So oftentimes people ask me, who is covering the donation surgery? Like, whose insurance is covering that? And that will always be the recipient's health insurance. The recipient's insurance covers the evaluation that you could complete, all of the testing that's done, as well as your hospital stay. The one caveat to that is the medications that you are sent home with after the surgery has occurred. That is the one expense that is not covered, but typically donors do have health insurance and their insurance will cover that, and they will have a small copay. Age, that's always a big thing on people's minds. Some people believe that if they're over the age of 50, they can't be a donor, and that is not true. It's not solely based on age, but more so about someone's overall health. And that is something that, is screened quite thoroughly when folks come in for evaluation. The next topic, sports and exercise. So a lot of times living donors are quite healthy. They want to try to help someone in need. And so a lot of people are often involved in sports or regular exercise. And all of those activities can be resumed typically about 6 weeks after surgery. The full length of recovery period is 6 weeks. And for 6 weeks, you're not able to lift anything over 10 pounds. But after that time has occurred, you would be cleared to go back to whether it's running or going to the gym, lifting, and things like that. Another question I often get from females is about the opportunity to get pregnant after you've donated. And that is something that can happen. Of course, the person's doctor would have to medically clear them after donation to get pregnant. I think the typical length is at least 1 year after donation, but of course that will be different for every person and what their provider suggests. And then the final thing, a lot of folks wonder, can they be healthy with 1 kidney after donation? And the answer to that is yes, and that is because, when someone comes in for the evaluation, as I mentioned earlier, they are carefully screened to ensure that their health and safety are at, quality after donation. And if there are any red flags to indicate that someone would have a negative health effect due to kidney donation, then obviously we would not be moving forward with them. So after donation, all donors are encouraged to have regular checkups with their primary care physician at least once a year. And as I kind of mentioned in some of the other things, just continuing to have a healthy lifestyle with diet, exercise, and things like that. So I hope that's helpful. If there are any quick questions now, I'm happy to answer, or I'm of course going to be here at the end as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Now I'm going to ask Tina Seamley to go over our next strategy.
Good morning. As mentioned, my name is Tina. I'm one of the nurses here in the transplant program. I have worked with kidney failure patients for the last 30 years. I spent 15 years working in the dialysis units. In the last 15 years, I've been here at UC with the transplant population. The last 7 or 8 years, I've worked strictly with the living donors. So a lot of you might know the function of the kidney, obviously, most people think is to get rid of the urine. It does do a lot more than that, however, getting rid of different electrolytes, different chemicals in our body that, if they're allowed to accumulate, can cause bad effects on our bodies. For example, potassium is in a lot of things that we eat. Too much of that or too little of that can affect your heart rate. Your blood count. If you're on dialysis, you might be receiving injections at dialysis because your nurse tells you that your blood count is low. Well, a healthy kidney produces hormones that tells your body to make red blood cells. So if your kidneys aren't healthy, that hormone is not being produced, and so we have to give you an artificial hormone, and that's where these injections at the dialysis unit comes from. So if you're always wondering, why is my blood count all the time getting low? Why am I so tired? That is the reason why. Kidney failure, of course, can also cause high blood pressure, which can lead to heart disease. A lot of dialysis patients might have problems breathing, maybe between treatments on your off day or right before your treatment. If your kidneys aren't getting rid of all of the fluid that you're taking in, it has to go somewhere. So it goes to your blood vessels first. Once the blood vessels and the tissues are saturated, it tends to go to your lungs. That's what's going to cause your shortness of breath. That's what happens when you notice the swelling in your hands and feet. Kidney disease can also cause joint pain, confusion, and other problems that you might be experiencing during your dialysis. Different treatments for kidney failure. Of course, your dialysis. A lot of people go to the centers 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week. Some people are fortunate enough to have a support person and are healthy enough that they can do it at home. There's peritoneal dialysis that's done through your abdomen. Some people will be on a cycler at night while they sleep. Others can do several exchanges through the day. And of course, ultimately, the best treatment for kidney failure is transplant. Different benefits from living donors for the transplant patient. The kidney that you would receive from a living donor typically works longer and better than that of a deceased donor. The average lifespan of a deceased donor kidney is 7 years, and a living donor kidney is 15 to 20 years. Now, that's of the kidney itself, not of the patient. Another benefit, of course, you don't have to sit on the waiting list for a deceased donor organ. Your functional level increases right away with the transplant. Some of the effects you were feeling from the dialysis could improve with transplant. Of course, your life expectancy increases. Dialysis is a good option, but it's a temporary option. We kind of consider it a Band-Aid, but not a cure. And of course, if we have a living donor, for each patient that gets a living donor, that's one less patient on the waiting list. So those that don't have living donors are able to have a shorter waiting time for those that have received the living donors. A lot of times when you're looking for a living donor, you're not sure who's a candidate and who's not. You might have ideas of who's a good one, who isn't. We always encourage you, if you've got anybody that is potentially interested, let them call us. Let us do that screening. We don't want you to eliminate somebody that might be a great candidate. One definite guideline is they have to be at least 18 years of age. Another definite guideline is that they cannot be diabetic. The other issues or health issues are kind of gray. There's no black and white. We don't have an upper age cutoff. Some programs do. A lot of times we get people that call, we test people that are in their 70s. sometimes as a potential kidney donor. As Monica mentioned earlier, it's up to the overall health of the patient, not the age. Sometimes we see 70-year-olds that are healthier than 50-year-olds. So please don't try to determine their candidacy. Let them call us. Let us talk to them and see. Sometimes, too, people think, well, I've had cancer before, I can't be a kidney donor. That's not always true either. It depends on what type of cancer it was, how long ago the cancer was, how invasive, what the treatment was. So again, if somebody's had cancer in the past and they're interested, let them call us. Hepatitis used to be a definite eliminator as a potential donor. Again, that is not so anymore. Sometimes, yes, people with hepatitis or a history of hepatitis are eliminated as donors, but it's not a definite eliminator. So please have those people call us as well. The living donor surgery itself is now what we call hand-assisted laparoscopic. All of our donors are scheduled for the laparoscopic surgery. It's a routine approach. They do get a lot more information about this when they come in for their evaluation. But there's two small and about 1-inch incisions just below the ribs on the side that the kidney is being removed from. And then there's a larger incision about 3 inches below the belly button where the kidney is actually removed. This allows for a faster recovery, shorter hospital stay, less pain. Typically, we're not using narcotics anymore. A lot of people are afraid of taking narcotics. They're afraid of becoming addicted. We have a new pain control protocol for the donors that avoids narcotics, which has been very effective. Again, smaller incisions, which allows for quicker return to your usual activities and quicker return to work after your surgery. The recovery, because of the approach, is, again, much quicker. The normal hospital stay is just overnight. So, for example, if surgery is on a Monday morning, the donor is typically ready to go home on Tuesday afternoon. They are up walking the afternoon of surgery. Full recovery, though, takes 4 to 6 weeks. Usually you can go back to a light-duty work in a couple weeks. It really depends on your energy level and your comfort level, but there's no physical restrictions from that. You do have to consider everyday activities, even outside of your work. They are restricted, donors are restricted from heavy lifting for 6 weeks. Heavy lifting is considered 10 pounds. So a good guideline is a gallon of milk. Anything heavier than a gallon of milk is restricted for the donors for 6 weeks. Because you've got that incision below your belly button, you are at risk for an incisional hernia there. So we need to give it 6 weeks to heal to avoid the hernia. We talked about the pain medication. Monica had mentioned it's usually a couple weeks. Some donors only use it for a couple days. You know, everyone is different, but again, we do avoid the narcotics. And there's no dietary restrictions. You know, we advise everyone to adopt a healthy, balanced diet. The heart-healthy diet is no added salt, that type of thing. But having been a kidney donor and only having one kidney does not mean that you have to avoid certain dietary treats in the future. The risks of living donation, and these are gone over very well with the donor, not only at the evaluation phase, but if they make it to the point of surgery, there's a pre-op visit with a surgeon, and these risks are discussed again. Anytime you go to surgery, you're at risk for certain risks like bleeding and infection. Living donors are at risk for a urinary tract infection. They do have a urinary catheter placed for the surgery itself, just for the time of surgery. That's typically removed before the patient wakes up from surgery. But because we have placed the catheter, that does increase the risk for a urinary tract infection. All surgery patients are at risk for pneumonia because the medications slow your breathing down and your bed rest slows the breathing down. Also, now you've got this incision on your belly and it might be a little uncomfortable when you take a nice deep breath. And that's how pneumonia forms. If you've got any secretions in your lungs, you're not taking nice deep breaths. If there are any secretions, you're not breaking those up to get them out. Blood clots is a possible risk after donation, again, mostly related to the bed rest, immobility. We do take preventative measures in the hospital for the donors to prevent both of these potential complications. Risk of a longer recovery than expected. There is a risk that if the surgeons run into problems during the surgery, they could make that incision below your belly button a little bit bigger, which could result in a longer than expected recovery. There is a slight increased risk of the donors developing high blood pressure long term, a slightly increased risk to the general population of those that have not been a kidney donor. And this is something that the physician talks about at length in the clinic when the donor comes in for an evaluation. And you see here the death rate is extremely low, 3 in every 10,000 people who donate. Kidney donation and pregnancy, Monica talked about this a little bit as well. It is safe for the donors to go on afterwards to have children. We've had several donors here at UC to do that. And oftentimes we'll get a donor in that situation and they'll want to talk to somebody that's actually been through it before, having been a kidney donor and gone on to have a healthy pregnancy. And our social workers are good putting them in contact with previous donors that have been through that. But again, it is something that you can do. So if you've got women that are interested in being considered as donors, but they're afraid about the option of pregnancy afterwards, again, have them call us and we can talk to them about it. They will need to, they will be considered high-risk pregnancy, but it is something that they can do. Living donation does not change the life expectancy of a donor. It's typically equal to that or above an average adult because, you've gone through an extensive screening prior, so we find if there's any health issues or not. We've also found that donors, having been through the donation process, they tend to take better care of themselves long term, and so they typically live longer. Follow-up care is provided. We do follow the donors for 2 years. So there is a 2-week follow-up with your surgeon, and then we do medical follow-ups in our transplant clinic at 6 months, 1 year, and 2 years. All of the testing and the follow-up is covered through the recipient's insurance or through the program. Covered expenses, like I said, all of the testing, all of the diagnostic studies, the surgery itself, the hospital stay, the follow-ups after surgery. The one thing that the donors are responsible for is after surgery, when they're sent home from the hospital, there are some prescriptions, pain medications, stool softeners, basic prescription medications. Those are the financial responsibility of the donor. Those are not covered through the recipient's insurance. Compensation, you cannot receive money for donation. Some people, in the past you've probably heard stories about people seeking compensation or getting paid to be organ donors. It is illegal. There are different resources that are available to donors, and the social worker does talk to the donors about that when they come in for their testing. They have recently expanded the coverage, so now it does apply also to some lost wages, but oftentimes there are resources available to cover for travel and lodging, lost wages, child care, that kind of thing. It just depends on the individual situation, and these are all issues and resources that the social worker will discuss with you at the time of evaluation. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Hi, everybody. My name is Becky. I'm one of the kidney transplant coordinators. I'm going to continue on where Tina left off, which is going over some of the compatibility testing and what that actually means. So part of the compatibility testing for transplant that we do, we can do blood samples or what's called a buccal swab, which is a cheek swab for a donor. So if somebody steps forward and they say, I want to be a donor for this intended recipient, then we can do either the blood sample or the cheek swab. And then what we do is we take that sample and compare it to the recipient. When we put these together, we can determine whether or not the donor is compatible or not compatible. Compatible means that the recipient could receive the transplant from that particular donor. Incompatible means that they're not a match. And so this is typically due to one of two reasons, either that they have antibodies or it's a different blood type or not compatible blood type. So if they're incompatible donors, we have two options. We have the paired exchange program, and we also can, in some cases, we can lower antibodies. So with the paired exchange program, anytime that we have a donor that is not compatible, we can take another pair that is in the exact same situation and we can exchange kidneys. So with this, we have donor 1 and recipient 1 that are not a match. Then we have donor 2 and recipient 2 that are also not a match. So what we can do is we can switch the donors on these and essentially exchange the donors. So we are part of the National Kidney Registry here at University of Cincinnati. We do quite a few of these every year. We can do all sorts of different options with these, from a simple exchange to something very, very complex. So an advanced donor situation or a voucher donor situation. So we have a lot of different options for this. The biggest question that I get with this program is it safe? And the answer is yes. So all of the kidneys that are part of this paired exchange program are GPS tracked, and we have backups for everything. So every time the kidney moves, we have an email and a phone call. So the kidneys are always tracked. And we've been a part of this program for going on about 8 years now here at UC. And I'll stop here for any questions.
And again, you can unmute yourself. I'm sorry, not unmute yourself. You can raise your hand and we'll unmute you, or you can also type those into the chat box.
Okay.
I'm not seeing anyone yet. So
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started on creating your story. So one of the things that recipients a lot of times have a hard time doing is figuring out what to say to other people, how to say it, how to share, and really trying to figure out what is their story. So this is what we're going to take a look at. So starting out, what is your story? And typically what I do is when I talk to anybody about sharing your story, or even trying to identify what it is, the very simple questions just go back to is, what do you enjoy? How has kidney disease affected your life? So a good example of this is, say that you have had a transplant in the past and you recently needed to go back on dialysis, or you need to go, or you're looking at getting another transplant. How has kidney disease affected your life? What have what are the things that you've been able to do? And what are some of the things that are dialysis restricts? And so those are things that are part of our everyday lives that make a big difference. And when people want to hear your story, they want to hear those things. And then if you were to receive a transplant, how would this help you? So a lot of folks, if they've been on dialysis for several years, they're kind of used to that, and that's their normal. So what does life look like if you were to receive that transplant? What things did you enjoy several years ago that you'd like to go back to being able to do? And then a couple things about your story is I created an acronym that is it's very simple, but it's something just to remember, is that be yourself. Nobody's expecting you to be anybody else. They want you to be you. When people read your story, they are wanting they're wanting to read your story and not anybody else's. So a lot of people get really intimidated when they start trying to share their story, because they're trying to make it bigger than it needs to be. People are not wanting something huge, they're wanting you, and they're wanting to read all about you. Another thing to remember is that to stay optimistic. A lot of people, when they've been on dialysis for a little while, it gets very disheartening, to say the least. And so working with a lot of patients that have been very difficult to match over the years, these folks really kind of struggle with this, but remaining optimistic and knowing that it's not impossible to get transplanted and that it is very real that this can happen. And then be unique. So, and the reason I share this is because each person's story is a little bit different. Your personality will come out in your story. So allow that to happen. And then the last is to stay real. And what this really means is that when you're going to share your story, some people will try to make up things to put in their story just because they want it to sound awesome. You don't have to do that. Make it simple and just share you, because that's what people are wanting to read the story for. So there's a couple things that I like to teach patients, and it's this understanding or this idea of the circle of influence. So within the transplant field and with in other areas of medicine, there are some ideas about the circle of influence that are who are the people that are the closest to you. A lot of times, if you've been in the or been around transplant for a while, we used to teach that patients should really talk to their family and friends first when they start sharing their story. Then we tell them to start with go to their extended family and friends, then their acquaintances, and then distant acquaintances. But what we found is that sometimes it's actually the frequency of communication that means more than anything. And the reason this matters is because all of our cultures are different. So if somebody that, let's say, I've got an 18-year-old that loves to send text messages all the time. That's the way that this person communicates all the time. That person, for them, sending out letters and sending out, doing different like yard signs and things like that, for them, they don't necessarily, wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. But then you have another person that they have a best friend that has a craft machine, and that's exactly what they love to do. They love making anything and everything. They'll do t-shirts and all sorts of stuff. That person, their story is or their way of communicating with other people is going to be a little bit different. So everybody's communication is just a tad bit different. And sometimes phone calls are the way that people love to communicate. Sometimes it's not. So what I started doing is looking at how frequently people communicated with each other and seeing if that makes a bigger difference. So what I'd like to encourage everybody to do is start with the people that you talk to every day. When you start to share your story, start with those folks. Those are the ones that you typically trust. They're the ones that have been around for a while, and they've likely been through this story with you. So to get to where you're at has not been an easy task. So understanding that they are there to help, and they often want to hear your story. So start with those folks, and then start talking to the people that you talk to once a week, and then people that you know but you don't talk to all the time. And then I wouldn't worry so much about the people that you don't know very well. And the reason why is there are these 4 types of people. So if we categorize people into people you talk to every day, people you talk to once a week, people you know but you don't talk to all the time, and people you don't know very well, they're likely going to have 4 responses. And those responses are going to either be, they're going to want to help support you, and that can look like anything. It can be from picking up groceries at the store. It can be picking or helping you during recovery. It can be bringing you to clinics, all sorts of different things. That support team is completely, how that looks is completely left up to you. So that's the first option. The second option is that they can be a kidney champion or a donor champion. It's someone who helps advocate for you and helps share your story. So they're helping every time that you share your story with somebody, you're asking them, hey, can you share my story for me? And anybody that's sharing it becomes a kidney champion for you. And then the third option is being a donor, and people will have that option. The fourth option is to not do anything, and giving everybody that option is okay. So a couple things that I want to go over is really how to spread the word and getting a couple conversation starters for us. So we talked about who to share with, and we talked about what to share, but how do you share it? And the question becomes, how do you communicate with your family? And how do you communicate with your friends? And I know I touched base a little bit earlier about this, but everybody's culture is a little bit different, and how we communicate with our family and friends is different. A good example of this is I have a big family. I have one sister that will never respond to a text message, ever. She will only respond to a phone call. The other ones will only respond to a text message, and she won't respond to a phone call. So like they're completely opposites. So then I have other family members that will respond to anything. So each person is a little bit different, but these are really good indicators of how you communicate with your family and your friends are good indicators of how you should share your story. And then how would you contact people if there was an emergency or an important topic to discuss? And then big thing is use these methods. The more comfortable that you are with talking or with sharing or with the method of sharing your story, then the easier it is going to be to share. So use these methods that fit your personality. And a good example of this is when there are all these different options to being able to share. The ones that you're most comfortable with are typically the ones that you're going to use. And the whole purpose of sharing your story is to share and to get the word out there. And if you're not comfortable with the method, a lot of people don't share. And that's what I've seen over the last couple of years. So a couple of reminders is that, is that discouragement does not mean defeat. People will say no, and don't listen for the no's, listen for the yes. A couple other things is that you're worth it. A lot of people forget this, that if this were your loved one, you would want to do everything possible to help. And a lot of people struggle with this concept of accepting help from people that have been around and been the supporters for many, many years. And sometimes that's exactly what the supporters and the people are wanting to be able to do, is to be able to even give even more. It only takes one living donor, and just listen for the yes. Sometimes these are the hardest concepts for people, but I do think that it's important for folks. So a couple things that I want to go over is when you share your story, there are a lot of different ideas that are out there. I tried to simplify it a little bit, because when you go through everything, it's like, how in the world do I possibly remember all of this? You don't have to. Use what's around you. So that is the easiest way to go to start. And I'm going to skip over the first couple of things here, the personalized websites and the business cards. I'll get down to those at the very end. But something to think about is if you're using what's around you, use the media. So use social media, local news stations, newspapers. I had a couple patients earlier this week do an article in a local newspaper. You can use your car. You can write on the windows. You can make bumper stickers or magnets. You can use your yard, so making yard signs or having a printing company make them. You can use your community, so hanging flyers on a bulletin board or utilizing church bulletins or prayer lists. You can also use yourself and others, so asking your family and friends to share your story, which is the Kidney Champion concept. And then you can also make t-shirts or for you and your kidney champions. You can also, I've seen some patients combine some things, and they will do t-shirts with the iron-ons. And then I've seen some folks make bags for when you're going to dialysis, posters, yard signs, all sorts of things. A good example of this is I had a family member that had a bone marrow transplant, and very fortunately we were able to find a match pretty quickly. But when we found that, we actually made custom t-shirts for them. And so we had an event for them, and I was able to make her bag and do custom shirts that matched everything. And it was pretty cool. But those are good options for people. So I'm going to go back a little bit. You can combine all of these efforts. And one of the recommendations that we have here, you see, is that we can help you with personalized websites. So you can actually post online, and you can share your story via personal website through the National Kidney Registry. By doing those, you can get a personal website, and you can get free business cards as well. So these websites are called microsites, or miniature websites. They allow you to share your personal story. They also allow you to share pictures. You can it shares the donor questionnaire link as well, and education. So a lot of the questions that Monica and Tina went over, and a lot of that education, you don't have to know all of that. It is helpful to know that information, but you don't have to. And when you create a microsite, it actually will bring in all of that education for you and give them resources. And then it eliminates a lot of those questions and trying to figure out the answers. I have a lot of recipients that tell me, I don't know the answers, so I don't share. You don't have to know the answers. That's what we're here for. So utilize us, but this is one of the beauties of having a microsite. So what this looks like is this. We've got an example is Jane Doe, and just a picture of her sitting on dialysis. But as you scroll down through the screen, there is, you can do a total of 5 pictures, and you'll notice that at the bottom, there's learn about living donation and register to donate. So anybody that registers to donate through your website, it links in your name and your date of birth so that you don't have to provide any information to the recipients, to the donors, which is huge. So they don't have to try to guess what your name is. They don't have to guess anything. They can just fill it out, and it links automatically to you. So, and then the next question that I always get is, how do I get started? So there is a link here, and it is in your participation packet as well. If you go to the website nkr.org/register, sorry, that should be a slash, there will be a campaign code or an access code that it will ask you for. And that is here. There is one in your packet as well. And then what they will do is they will give you, you'll put in your contact information, put in your date of birth, that's used to verify that it's really you. And then you'll get an email with confirmation that we approved you. Once you have that email confirmation, then you'll follow the links to customize your site. One thing that I do want to point out is that patients have had, in the last couple of days, I've had a couple inquiries about whether or not the registration is actually working. And it sure is. And what happened is that there is a glitch on the website currently, as of today, that if you are trying to access it from your phone, it is not allowing you to hit the registration button. But if you turn your phone sideways, it will correct it. So that should be resolved hopefully by the end of the day. But I know a couple folks have reached out to me that they couldn't find that registration button. So just turn your phone sideways and that will work. So just a step-by-step guide. We can go to nkr.org/register. You'll enter your access code and fill out the form. And then you'll read a privacy information or read the privacy information and check the box if you agree to proceed. And then after that, you'll check your email. You'll open the email, you read the email, and then click on the link to customize your site. Once you have once you've clicked on that email link, your website then becomes active. So there are two different versions of the website. Oh, hang on just a second here. And where did I go? Okay, and I think we're back. Can you guys see everything okay? We're good? Okay.
Sorry, we can see the PowerPoint. I didn't know if you were trying to share the video, but we can still see the PowerPoint.
Okay, sounds good. So with this, once you've checked your email, there are two different versions of the site. There's a starter site and a custom site. The starter site is just simply with your name on it and your age. That starter site can be used at any given point. After you've created that, you will get your business cards in the mail. But what I would recommend is actually doing the custom site, and that's uploading your pictures and your personal story. So what I'd like to do is show you a video of how this actually works, because this is probably the hardest part for some folks. So in here, we're going to go in and we are checking our email. We've got it, and it's saying, okay, let's get started. So we're going to click here, and here's our information. So this is what a starter site will look like. And then once we go back to our email, and we can customize it, and we will type in anything that we need here, and we can upload our pictures. And I will say, for some folks, I've had them reach out to me saying that they need some help with this. I always recommend having families start helping you with it, because it's a good option for them to start sharing with you and to be able to help out. So, and we'll upload a picture here. And it's just showing you exactly how this works. All right. And then after you are finished, you'll hit the submit button, and then it'll be sent for a review process. That review process comes here to UC, and then it will also go to the National Kidney Registry, who sponsors the websites. Once that review process is completed, you will get an email with that. And then what I would recommend is that you and your kidney champions and support team will then need to share this link with other people. So oftentimes we find that social media posts on average have been the most effective method for sharing your website with others, in combination with your kidney champion teams. So that seems to be a very, very good process for people. So I would encourage everyone to not only have a microsite, but also to have your kidney champions and your support team share that with everybody else. And any questions? Oh, okay.
Don't see any hands raised.
And then building a network of advocates, we talk about that a little bit in the slides before this and talking about that circle of influence. And anytime that you share, have ask people to share your story. And so that is a good way of getting your story out there and building that network.
All right. Thank you, Becky. Well, I'll share a couple and I'll also let UC Health chime in. The next slide just has some websites that you guys can access. Of course, the National Kidney Foundation, UNOS, International Transplant Nurses Society. Also in your packet on the very last page, and we'll show a slide with this as well, our contact information for myself, for Perry Hall with National Kidney Foundation, and then everyone from UC that's on the call today. And then also I'll show in a minute your action plan. It's the second to the last page in the packet. And that also has information for the NKF Cares, the peer mentor hotlines, where the National Kidney Foundation can connect you with someone that can also act as a peer mentor or be a support system for you as well. All right. Well, before we get into questions, I'll really quickly go over the, oh, sorry, there's Perry's information on the screen, and I think the next one will have the UC Health information. So you can either write those down, but also if you're able to get access to that packet that Perry sent, it has all of this in it as well on the last page. So here, I don't know how much anyone can see. On the next to last page is the Create Your Action Plan. And this is really just a way to be able to use the strategies that were discussed today to put a plan into action. So just some very specific things written on that action plan, you know, to finish your story, if you want to share it by email, you know, getting your microsite ready. All of those are listed on the action plan, and it has a place where you can check off. Will I do that? Will, you know, will I find someone else too? And really, when's my goal date to have that accomplished, just so you can have a plan in place post-call to be able to start moving on some of these strategies that were discussed today. So we will open it up for questions. And now it looks like I have one in the question box. Someone is saying, how do you share your links once your site is complete?
There are a couple things that you can do. If you go on to, I'm going to pull up a couple things on my phone here for you guys. Okay. So there are a couple things that you can do. I've got this, the Jane Doe website pulled up on my phone. You can actually, if you have an iPhone or an Android, you can save any website to a app. You can make a link on your homepage for that. And by doing that, you click the little up button. By also clicking the up button, you can also go to different settings of sharing on your messages. So I could go to my messages and type in anybody's name or do all of my contacts, select all of those, and it will send them this picture. Then you can put in on the comments, you can say, please share my story, thanks. And that's it. Then it goes out to everybody on your contact list on your phone. The other thing that you can do is you can share it on Facebook or social media, any social media network. And the way that you would do that is on this same up button, if you scroll around down here, you should see that whatever apps are on your phone, you could utilize those. So whether it be email, whether it be social media, any of those, you can click on that and share it. What I would recommend is sharing it more than one time. Sometimes it helps to give it a couple of days before or between sharing, or sometimes it even helps to even take a couple weeks in between sharing it. But when you share it, if you ask people to say, please share my story as well. If you're not interested in being a donor, please share my story with others. And when you do that, it will allow you to be able to get your story out, and a lot of people will share it from there. It's a good question.
Do we have anybody else? I'm watching to see if anybody raises their hand, but you can also type a question to the chat box, like April just did. Everyone's quiet today. Well, I'll just say, we've had several of these workshops and definitely have been in a position to see some of these strategies work. We were just on a call this morning with someone who decided to be a living donor last year, and that was in result of a Facebook post someone had shared from her neighborhood. She ended up being a living donor for a neighbor's son, but she'd never met them prior to seeing the post. She just saw it, was moved to learn more, and ended up being a donor last year. So certainly sharing your story and getting it out there has been successful. Looks like I do have another question. How do you know your website is ready to share?
Sorry, I muted myself again. So as soon as you get that starter site, as soon as it's been approved, then it is immediately ready. You should get an email from the National Kidney Registry, which is nkr.org. You should be getting something from them that says it's activated. If you have questions about whether or not it's active, reach out to me directly. I will be able to tell you, and I can give you your URL. I can also send you stuff in MyChart. So if you're a MyChart user, I can set you up with that as well, so that we can send you any information and that way. So.
This is Tina again. I can tell you from working with the living donors that this social media really does work. We get a lot of people that call having seen these stories out on social media. Some people know the patient. Some people might know their daughter or their cousin. Some people have no idea who these people are, just feel the need to come forward to see if they can help. So it really is an effective way to get your story out there.
Let me see. It looks like we have another.
I agree.
Oh. Right. Would anybody else from UC like to comment while we still have it open? Wait 1 second.
I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so my name's Nicole. I'm one of the pre-transplant coordinators here. And just briefly to tell you about my story and my family's story with kidney transplant and donation. So my mom needed a kidney transplant, found out in 2010 that she was pretty sick. It took until 2012 to allow her to let me donate to her. So in May of 2012, I was able to be a living kidney donor for her and believe in transplant so much and have seen firsthand the difference it can make in somebody's life that now I am a transplant coordinator here at UC for almost the past 2 years and work with patients before transplant. But one of the biggest things I hear, and same with my situation, was parents don't want their children to donate, their adult children. And I always just try and say, think of it from our perspective. We want our parents to be around. We want our grandchildren to, or we want their grandchildren, our children, to have that experience with them. And I'm, let's see, 8+ years out. My labs are good. I make sure I get checked every year. I just did that last Friday. Everything's good. And it's one of the best decisions I've ever made in my life, and so happy and proud to have been able to do that and to give my mom that extra time. So something just to consider. The parents' first reaction is, no, I don't want my kids to do it or to donate, but you know, from our perspective, we want you around for a long time as well.
Thank you, Nicole, for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
It does look like we have a couple more comments. I can't see them currently.
We have a question that says she's also had friends ask, what is the recovery time if they decide to donate?
April, this is Tina again. The recovery time, they're usually here in the hospital just about 36 hours. They can go back to light duty work in a couple weeks, but they can't do any heavy lifting, anything over 10 pounds for 6 weeks. So even if, let's say, they've got a light duty job, it might be a desk job, as long as their energy level and their pain control is okay, they can go back in a couple weeks. I've had people go back even sooner. There's no physical restrictions against that, but they do have to remember things at home that are over 10 pounds that we do every day that we don't typically consider strenuous. You know, if we've got little kids at home, we can't be lifting them, you know, for 6 weeks. We've got to give our body time to heal. Just simple things like bringing the groceries in from the car, carrying laundry downstairs. Everyday things that we do that are over 10 pounds, we're going to be restricted from that for 6 weeks. Once that 6 weeks is up and you're physically recovered from the surgery, they're going to be able to do everything that they're doing today.
All right, thank you. All right, does anyone else have questions? I'm not seeing any in the chat box. No hands raised. Okay, well, if anyone doesn't have any further questions, I want to thank UC for helping us offer this program today. Also, just a reminder for everyone that's joined, in your packet of information is contact info for everyone on the call from UC. Also, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, myself or Perry, for resources or support. We'll do a follow-up email as well. There's also a survey you can fill out about the program today, but I'll include all of everyone's contact information in that email again. Again, if you have any questions about anything that was discussed, the microsite or any questions you think of after we leave this presentation, please don't hesitate. We definitely want to be there to support you and answer any questions that you may have. Okay. Becky, do you guys have anything else?
No, thank you guys very much. I'm excited. If there's anything that you guys need from us, just let us know.
Thank you to everybody. We'll end it now, but again, we'll send that email out, and certainly don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any questions or need additional support. Thank you to everybody, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.